Welcome back, gamers. We're diving deep into all the content we're receiving in Phase 2 of the alpha that's lasting from December 20th to May 1st. We're only discussing new content getting added into the game, so if you haven't been following along, check out my Everything Alpha 2 video linked in the description below to see what Phase 1 had to offer. And keep in mind, all Phase 2 content will not be available on December 20th, but instead will come out at some point over the 4 months of Phase 2. So before we get into it, let Paul Giamatti's warm embrace prepare you for this wealth of alpha knowledge. Phase 2 of the alpha will be focused on node advancement, economy, and node vassalship. Just so you know, you're going to hear me say node a lot of times in this video. The node system is by far the most complex system that will be in Ashes of Creation, with a lot of other core systems depending on it. So I am glad Intrepid Studios is putting a heavy emphasis on it. Archetype and combat balance will also be a smaller focus for this phase, and we will be getting 5 days of testing time as opposed to just weekends that we had during Phase 1. Our current lawless zones of the Vandegar Tropics and Sandsquall Desert are getting some terrain updates with the addition of gatherable materials. The zones themselves are also getting expanded, leaving room for the opportunity of new nodes and points of interest to eventually come online, which would push the lawless areas of those zones further out to its new borders. Each of these zones will also bring along new soundtracks from the musical composers Anand Zur and Bear McCreary to fill out the ambiance of the world. 2 new unique loadouts are also getting introduced, and this could mean a few different things. First, this could mean that the tropics and desert are going to have nodes with a layout and architecture that reflects the environment that they're in. Second, current node structures will take on the look of the dominant player race that has citizenship within the node, so we may finally see some Vec or Pyrian style buildings. Or third, we just see the same buildings we saw in Phase 1, but just moved around. I'll keep my copium to a minimum and just say it's most likely this third option. Speaking of some player race influenced buildings, we're getting 2 new playable races. The Veyloon are the second human race next to the Kalar, and this race traces their origins to the Sandsquall Desert, where they relied on bravery, curiosity, cunning, and charisma to survive. Make sure you have all of these traits active before venturing out to those deserts. The second playable race is the Dwarven Dunir, who value craftsmanship and underground riches. These hardy and resilient folk are just as loyal as they are handsome. Just don't make the mistake of calling this lovely bearded lady the man of the forge. Since node advancement is a major focus in this phase, we'll be seeing nodes up to stage 4, the town stage, which is 1 stage higher than the village nodes that we have been living in. Most notably, the town will come along with more plots of lands for mayors to construct buildings in, along with an increase in size and additional service buildings. For the first time, we'll be getting player housing in the form of static or instance housing, and also freeholds. Instance housing will be apartments or rooms at an inn that will be accessible to all players. Static housing will be houses naturally occurring in the node that players can purchase starting at the node's village stage. Steven previously mentioned that static housing may start at just 8 houses, so this form of player housing will be very limited. Also, something that may be new is that players must own some sort of player housing within a node to obtain citizenship of that node. This is a mechanic that still may be bypassed just for alpha purposes, but it is the intent for the launch of the game. And the ultimate form of player housing is freeholds. Freeholds are plots of land surrounding a node where players can construct their homestead and eventually turn them into a farm, a sprawling tavern, or the ultimate processing station. There's a whole developer livestream on just freeholds, so make sure to check out that video. To go along with node advancement, the node vassalship system will be implemented. This is when a node reaches stage 3, they automatically vassalize a neighboring node and lock it out from progressing to a node stage equal to that of its sovereign node. And when a node reaches stage 4 or beyond, they can introduce more nodes into its vassalship, causing a web of nodes under control of one parent node. All vassal nodes are subject to the political actions of their parent node as well. And in case you were worried, I'm not done talking about nodes quite yet. Our first iteration of node sieges will be introduced. To go along with this, siege vehicles will also be available that are supposedly craftable through artisan professions or purchasable through NPC vendors. If a node's siege is successful, then that node and all nodes under it and its vassalship are completely destroyed and reset to allow new nodes to be built up and cause an ever-changing world. And something to go to war over is the addition of relics. Relics will be stored in a node's reliquary and will provide benefits to citizens of that node, such as the ability to craft legendary items, combat buffs, or artisan buffs. Relics will be obtained through many different ways, such as a certain number of citizens achieving a milestone like Grandmaster in a specific artisan profession, or large relics found in the world after killing raid bosses that require a caravan to transport it back to your node. This could lead to large PvP open world battles between nodes. We'll be seeing a new election process from the economic node. This mayoral election process will be a blind bid auction, so whoever forks over the most gold gets to be mayor. It is unclear if we are getting fully functional economic nodes as well, or just the election process on top of the scientific nodes we saw for every node in Phase 1. In addition to a new mayoral election process, we are getting new mayoral commissions, and one of these new mayoral commissions may be a prerequisite to starting a node siege. Story arcs are finally coming along, like we saw with Carfin.
Well, like we saw with Carfin.
Like we saw with Carfin.
Oh, the blood still due?
Much like many things in the world of Vera, increased player activity demands a response from the environment. One of these things is story arcs. As nodes develop, story arcs will appear, and story arcs will have chapters. And each chapter will have a narrative or quest for players to complete. These chapters may have multiple pathways, these chapter objectives may be failed, and these chapters may cause changes to the environment and monsters. Intrepid Studios senior quest designer Scott put it perfectly when he said that story arcs are like a pre-packaged tabletop campaign.
They contain like all of the NPCs and quests and monsters, like all the things you need to make a cool fantasy story. They're not procedurally generated. We author them, we write all the dialogue, and we construct all the narrative beats and everything like that. But they will enter the world dynamically depending on the state that the world is currently in, how players have built up specific nodes, like what races control various nodes. We have plans to include lots of different things on top of that. But yeah, it's we don't have any quest hubs or anything like that in this game because players build up all the cities. So we had to get a system that kind of looks at what players are doing and can inject content into the world that makes sense for what they're doing.
More dynamic events will be added in addition to the ones we already saw during Phase 1, and most importantly, we are getting a new open world dungeon with plenty of implications. This dungeon is called the Befallen Forge. The lore behind this forge is that it was active many years ago, before even the start of the Aelan Empire, during the reign of King Atrax. This forge was stationed by the Dunes and Kill dwarfs and was boarded up due to a Dracolich living inside. And this forge also lies beneath the Kalanmir Castle. So a few things to unpack here. First off, we are getting a new point of interest in addition to this dungeon called Kalanmir Castle. Also, if we take a look at the world map of Vera, the Dunes and Kill Mountains lie to the north of the Vandegar Tropics. So I think it would be safe to assume that this dungeon would lie on the border of the tropics and the Dunes and Kill Mountain territory. Lastly, with the addition of story arcs that we just discussed and how the world responds to node progression, mixed with Steven mentioning that this Befallen Forge was boarded up, I think this new dungeon will be locked behind either node progression or story arc progression, and we'll be seeing some environmental changes happening to Kalanmir Castle as we unlock the Befallen Forge that lies beneath. And no party delving into a dungeon would be complete without a rogue, which is the long-awaited archetype that will be coming to us at some point during Phase 2. We have not seen any gameplay of the rogue quite yet or know any of their abilities. The one thing that we do know about the rogue is that they will have true stealth, which may only be revealed through magical means such as a mage's arcane eye. To go along with the rogue, dual-wield daggers will be a new weapon added, along with a two-handed mace and two-handed axes. A few new ways to enhance equipment is also getting added into Ashes through tempering, gem socketing, and gear ascension. We don't know much about these three avenues of gear enhancement, but tempering will allow players to improve stats on items. This means that we can improve equipment post-crafting, or even equipment that has been dropped in the open world. Gem socketing will allow for the addition of waterfall stats to be added to items, such as increased critical hit chance or increased magical casting speed. And we don't know what Gear Ascension really is. It could possibly mean increasing the rarity of items post-craft as well, like improving a rare weapon into a heroic weapon, but we will know more about this in the future. A nice quality of life item will be the addition of the repair kit. If equipment breaks down while you're out grinding, you lose stats offered by that piece of equipment, and you have to run back to town to get that equipment repaired. So now, remember to bring a few repair kits with you before you leave town so your equipment doesn't break down while you're out grinding. Artisan professions are finally getting their skill trees. This was showcased many months ago, but artisan skills will revolve around increasing gathering speed, yield, or rarity for the gathering professions. The surveying pylons can also be enhanced through the artisan skill tree. Processing professions will come with increased processing speed passive skills, and crafting professions will come with increased crafting quality passive skills. So a bunch of common materials in a craft could potentially yield an uncommon product with enough increased quality. Group-based gathering will be introduced as well. For each gathering profession, we have 3 different tool sets, and I believe one of these tools will be required for group gathering, such as a saw for 2 people to use together to saw down a large tree. And the last addition to artisan professions, which may be the most interesting mechanic out there out of all artisan professions, is that animal husbandry is adding animal breeding. Animal husbandrists will be able to breed animals together to produce pets, mounts, livestock, or beast of burden with unique stats. There will also be a genetic system involved to give RNG chances of unique animal traits. This will allow for the possibility of some cool and rare mutations. As I mentioned earlier, economy testing will be a focus of this phase of the alpha and allow for players to set up shops to sell goods. Now, Steven said that this will be in an early functional state where players will just list their shops at an NPC vendor within a node, and players can interact with that NPC to see players' shops. So we won't see a bunch of players sitting around town with a text box above their head advertising what they're selling. Right now, treasure maps are pretty simple, that come along with a riddle and a pretty obvious objective quest marker that leads you pretty much right to the treasure. But we are moving closer to what treasure hunting is supposed to be. Treasure maps will come in different rarities and possibly just fragments of maps that may need to be pieced together through the scribing crafting profession. These maps will lead you to just general areas, and if the treasure is found, will offer various rewards, including the potential for copper. But keep in mind that treasure hunting is now a timed thing, so make sure you are ready to go exploring before you open that map. The last thing we will be getting in Phase 2 is player leaderboards. Now everyone on the server can see who is dominating a certain area of content. The leaderboards will showcase things such as the number of dungeons or raids completed, PvP kills, caravans raided, or artisan profession activity. And that pretty much sums up all of the new content we're getting at some point during the next 4 months of Ashes of Creations Alpha 2. If you want a more in-depth dive on everything about nodes or artisan professions, I will have some videos linked in the description below where I explore everything we know about those systems. And some information on those systems are things that have only been talked about in developer live streams or interviews, but not yet seen in game. So check those videos out if you want to learn everything you can. Let me know in the comments what content you are most excited to explore during this next stage of the alpha. Thanks for watching, and I hope you are just as excited as I am for Phase 2 coming in just a few short days.